Our speaker tonight is Colonel Dan Nolan, and I have to thank him for coming up because he left from Tampa. And the weather, I saw the weather report before I came over tonight, and severe thunderstorms, and Dan tells me that there were actually tornadoes. So Dan, we really appreciate you persevering and coming on down. Just a little bit about Dan. He had 26 years in the Army and retired as the chief of SYNC Action Group Central Command. He chose to combine his knowledge of leadership and skills as a trainer to help businesses grow the talent reserves they need. While in the military, Dan served in key assignments, most recently with U.S. Central Command in Tampa, where he was the principal advisor to General Tommy Frank. His commands include the 1st Armored Division Artillery. He has spent time in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Iraq, and Washington, D.C., and understands the complexity of these various environments. Dan has been providing leadership for an effort to link the strategic importance of energy independence to the tactical relevance of reducing the use and transportation of fossil fuels in order to lower the risk to soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines, work that has been featured in Thomas Friedman's 2008 book, Hot, Flat, and Crowded. He is also featured in Amanda Little's Power Trip and the documentary Carbon Nation. He's a graduate of the Military Academy at West Point. He holds a master's degree in system engineering from the University of Southern California, as well as a master's of arts in strategic planning with U.S. Naval War College. So I'm embarrassed to say that we have a policy paper on energy independence, and I don't want Dan to see it because we'd probably be embarrassed.
You're killing me.
Welcome, Dan.
Well, thank you all for having me, and thanks for taking me late because it looks like I got $1 million here waiting on a dime. I did say there were some reports of tornadoes, but having lived 5 years in Kansas, reports of tornadoes in Florida aren't nearly as bad as what you would have got to see in Fort Leavenworth. It is a pleasure to talk to a group like this, and first of all, I'll start off by saying I thank all of you for your service to this nation, and for what you're doing now as you look at what's important for this country and what the opportunities they are, especially in the area of energy. Now, energy is something we've always just sort of taken for granted. Can you hear me without this? If I speak up, okay. I feel tied to that, and then I become an easy target. I do want to talk to you about a little bit about my background. I appreciate that introduction. It's just the way I wrote it. Except there was a lot more flowery stuff in it, obviously cut out for a good reason. But I did spend 26 years in the military. My last assignment, I came out of Kosovo, and I was given a choice between going to Washington, D.C. or Tampa. And in June of 2001, Tampa sounded like a lot better idea than Washington, D.C. for all of you who served in that location. It changed on September of that year, and I got the opportunity to travel all over the Middle East and to really see what that very critical region means to this country. In 2002, though, I retired from the military, and because getting shot at wasn't interesting enough, I became a Florida election official. And for 2 years, 2002 to 2004, just so we get the dates right, you all understand this, I have to explain it to other people. But I was deputy supervisor of elections in Hillsborough County, helping them transition from paper to electronic and then eventually back to paper. And understanding how important it is to reestablish trust with the electorate, helping them understand what this very complex process is. It's a process we didn't really pay a lot of attention to because, those elections just happen until there's a difference of 536 votes. So just like in the election business, the energy business, I came to kind of accidentally. I was working for a group called the Rapid Equipping Force. It's an Army group that looks at solving commanders' immediate battlefield needs with technology. We did things like putting robots in the field. And in Afghanistan, we were sending soldiers down into holes in the ground with a flashlight and a 9mm pistol. This is a big upgrade from Vietnam, where we were sending you down the hole with a flashlight and a .45. So the difference between the .45 and the 9mm was the only improvement we'd made in 40 years. we said there's a better way to do this, and we developed robots that allow us to put those into the ground and do more to protect our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and look at those things. Well, while I was there, we got an urgent operational needs request from the Anbar province, which is near the Syrian border in Iraq. Very dangerous place. And the request was for a hybrid electric power station. And I was a little confused because I knew the Marines were out there, and I was trying to figure out if the Marines had suddenly become Birkenstock-wearing tree hunters. I mean, why did they want this thing? Well, because the most dangerous thing to do in the Anbar province was to drive 5 gallons of diesel from that forward operating base, the FOB, out to the Syrian border site. So anything we could do to reduce that. So I was asked to take a larger look at this. We took a strategic look at it. And what we found is that a majority of the casualties in Iraq were occurring on the roads while we were delivering supplies, as we all know. And 70% of what we were hauling was bulk fluids, water and fuel. Now, there's not much you can do about water in the desert yet. But there is something you can do about fuel. So we said, let's go figure out how we're actually using it. And the assumption was, you know, those big M1 tanks with their big gas turbines burning up there, and that's where it was all going. Turned out that wasn't the case. When we went out and started visiting forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan and places like Djibouti. Anybody ever been to Djibouti? What time of year were you in Djibouti?
I was in December of '73 or November '73.
Lovely in December.
Gravity fed refuel.
I know it well.
236,000.
I suggest you have a chance. Djibouti's in the Horn of Africa, the very tip of the horn.
Yeah.
If you really, you understand humidity, but you know it never gets above 100 degrees when it's 95% humidity. It was 110 and 98% humidity and not raining. It is one of the most brutal environments there. But when we went there, we found that 95% of the fuel that was being used there was to run generators. Generators that were running air conditioners. Air conditioners that were air conditioning tents. And we found that to be true in most of the places. So we had anywhere from 50 to 70% of our power was going to do that. And the reason we have to do that is not just so soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines can be comfortable, but because we have all this technology to now take with us. You know, if we can see you, we can hit you. If we can hit you, we can kill you. Well, only if our night vision goggles, you know, are charged up. So this dependence on technology has come with it, the need to be able to condition the environment we operate in. So we went back and we came up with a really simple idea. We're going to take this spray foam insulation that one of the guys came up with, I got it in Joe Amity, and we're going to spray it on the outside of tents. My contribution was it was going to be on the outside of tents because I didn't want to tell all soldiers to drag all their stuff outside while we did it on the inside. But we found that we saved about 70% of the energy that was being used. And when I first got over there, we do use something called the fully burdened cost of fuel. You know, you can buy that gallon of fuel in Kuwait for $2.50, and then you put it in an up-armored vehicle with helicopters flying over the top, and troops protecting it, and all the other things you have to do to get it up into Baghdad. And by the time, if you count all the burdens that come with that, by the time you deliver that gallon of fuel, it's now worth $20. So, you know, a 10 times increase in the cruise service.
Afghanistan, isn't that cost up over $400 per gallon?
I actually had the pleasure of, no, I won't say it's a pleasure. I corrected the commandant of the Marine Corps on that. Because the only time you get up to those numbers is when one F-16 refuels the other F-16, and you count, as part of the burden cost, all the education of the pilots and their bar bill. That's the only time you get up. But still, when you think we're taking in 1.5 million gallons a day into Iraq and into Afghanistan. At $20 a gallon, that gets very expensive.